Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin wa ala awliya'ihi al-muqarrabeen. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, thank you for being here and giving me this opportunity to share some thought with you. I would love and would want that I am brief and we have more discussion and more input from you. So we have some quite learned and experienced people in the audience, like Dr. Gulen and Sister Dilara Said. She is very much involved in the field which I am really discussing here, and I would certainly leave time for her to say a few words. What I'm talking here about, a kind of culture talk. What is culture, what is religion, how do they overlap, and how culture is formed and constructed, and which determines the future of a community in a society. Culture is in fact the most important dimension of our life. It won't be wrong if I say that individual is a fish and culture is the water in which it swims. And if individual is deprived of that water, then it does not survive for a long time. One of the important aspects of Islam is that wherever Islam went as a religion, it in fact keep the historical culture intact, but it also Islamized it. And this spirit of integration and acceptance of diversity was present in Islam from the very beginning in the teachings of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. During his time, the African tribe came to Medina and they offered an African dance to the companions of Prophet ﷺ. And Sayyidina Umar, he was kind of angry that what is this, that these people are coming here and in the mosque of Prophet they are doing this dance. Because he thought that according to Arab culture, this is something not really appropriate. Prophet ﷺ prohibited Sayyidina Umar that he should not judge other people and their culture according to his own standards. And in fact, he allowed them to dance and he loved it. And his wife Sayyida Aisha was sitting on his shoulders to watch the performance. So the idea that cultural diversity, and at that moment one comment which Prophet ﷺ made was that our religion is not that harsh. It has room, it has possibility of expansion and acceptance of other traditions. So what we see that wherever Islam went, Islam in a unique way kept the core elements of historical dimensions intact. Okay. But at the same time, it Islamized them, that their religious and spiritual outlook was changed and transformed. We have one great scholar in Chicago, Dr. Fethullah, and in one of his writings on Islam, the cultural imperative, he gave a very beautiful example that he says Islam is like a river of clean and pure water, which is passing through many terrains. And if it passes through a land which has red stones, the color will look red to you. If it is passing through a blue landscape, the color will appear black to you. So this is the way that the religion and culture interact with each other. Therefore, one of the things we see in Islamic societies, that wherever you go, you will see that the population consider Islam as native. Like growing up in Pakistan, which was part of India, I would never imagine that Islam is Arabian, or it has something to do with Middle East. As a student, as a matter of knowledge, I can go and learn. But there was nothing that I should feel it is foreign to me, something which has been grafted artificially onto something which is different. If you are in Turkey, you feel Islam is Turkish. The Turkish identity and the Islamic identity, they are totally connected with each other. And in fact, Europeans for a long time, they will use the word Turk as synonym to Muslim. So if they have to abuse someone, they will call him Turk because they want to abuse him as a Muslim. And the same thing, you go to Malay and Indonesia and wherever you will go, you will see that Islam is made room for itself in such a way that it becomes a totally native, indigenous phenomena. And that is the reason that Islam is very deep-rooted and permanent. And we see that even those lands where Islam went as a result of military expedition, if the power of Muslims, the political, military power of Muslims declined, still the populations never reverted back to older religions. They never said, okay, the Arabs are gone, Ottomans are gone, so now we are going back to our Hindu or Buddhist or that religion. It never happened. So such is the integration of of culture and religion and Islamic tradition. And this is very important because culture gives stability to our individual being. Without that, we are unsettled. You see, many young Muslims, they feel the identity issues and problems, even though they are born in America in a fairly comfortable settings. But this deprivation of being in a strong, deeply rooted culture has created an alienation in their personalities. Okay? Because only a strong self can face the world. Okay? If self is weak, if it is unsettled, if it is not sure of itself, simply having a job or profession cannot make him or her a productive person. So a strong self is needed, and strong self requires a strong culture. Otherwise, the self remains in a very unsettled situation. Now, in modern age, Islamic cultures, and in fact the religious cultures all over the world, they have faced enormous challenges. Because what took place in the Western world, particularly starting 17th to 19th century, it has been the greatest rupture in human society. Not only in Islamic society, but in human society, that where the very ideas of being human and our understanding of universe and our place in it, they were all fundamentally changed. They were all questioned, they were all challenged. And a new world emerged which started to understand existence in a totally different fashion. Historically, all cultures were religious and spiritual. All of them rooted in the reality of God, no matter how they defined this God. Even if Muslims go to India, they face a Hindu culture, which is very far from their monotheism, but yet it is deeply spiritual culture. A Hindu does not eat food unless his 3-4 gods are present there, sitting next to the food. So Islam encountered a religious and spiritual culture, and being a superior religious and spiritual idea, it could win, it could convince, and it could change the local populations to their message and their mode of living. Now, modern society has removed God from the center of our existence. That is a very core issue. Like speaker before me, Brother Ari, is sitting here as he was talking about human inner waswas, and Brother Ridwan, who was here, he asked a question about the understanding of modern psychology versus a religious understanding which is based on the notion of soul, a soul which is connected with God. And that is in fact the key difference between modern and pre-modern. That all pre-modern societies, they understood human self and universe directly connected with the realities which are unseen. Okay? In our mystic thought, Ibn Arabi believed, and his thought has been the most dominant for 1,000 years, that existence is nothing but God and his activity. It is only God who exists, and his activity creates some contingent existences, short-term, short-lived existences which come out of God's activity. So there is no reality and there is no existence without God, which is at the very foundation and at the very center of our understanding of universe. And it is in fact that element which cements human self. As Quran says that وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُم. That do not be like those who forgot God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they forgot themselves. So he didn't say that they forgot God, so God forgot them, but he said they forgot God, and the consequence of God is that they are lost. Okay? Because what was the source of meaning which can give them an authentic self? That was God. And they broke and they disintegrated this relationship. So from this denial of God, where God either it does not exist or it exists only as a possibility, an acts of algebra which we are discovering, and we might discover it is there or not there. It necessarily created also this self, this person whose only pursuit is pleasure. Atheism and hedonism are connected. Okay? So increasingly, as societies moved away from the tradition, we see that the ideas of atheism and the consequences of that belief are becoming more and more apparent. So we see that the modern society is in fact in a very deep spiritual crisis. And if you are a person like me who has been in university for 30 years, I can see very clearly that how American culture has declined. It's not only our culture has declined, and not only that we as Muslims or Pakistanis are in some messy situation, but in fact I can see very clearly that how American culture has declined, how it has been corroded from inside, and how deeply disturbed these young Americans are. They are really in deep, deep trouble. Okay? I always ask my students the first day in the class, how many of you are religious, no matter what religion you have? So from 20 years ago, when everybody will raise hand, today hardly a single person will raise hand. Because he has lost faith in anything. And sometimes you say, my parents are Catholic, but I really don't believe. Okay? Sometimes even Muslim students will say, oh, my parents came from Pakistan, but I really don't have much interest in religion. So this modernity, which used to be very powerful and very charming, that all of us surrender to it, is itself in a critical stage. Okay? So we are really at that time in history where we don't know which societies are really good to live. Okay? If you say, which society is good, that I can move there and live there, it's hard to say, because all societies are going through a transition and a crisis. Now, this Western modernity, it came to Muslim world as a result of colonialism, istimar. So that creates additional problem for us, that modernity is not organic to our culture. It is foreign imposed. and many convulsions and tensions which you see in the Muslim world today, from Afghanistan to Syria and in between in all countries. They are the direct result of Islam's encounter with modernity and their incapacity to handle this challenge. Because it came to them at the time when they were weak and they were in a state of decline, and they could not face this challenge. And even today, there is hardly any Muslim country in the world which is really free, even though they are technically free, but their destiny is determined by other powers. It is impossible for them to ignore what powers of the world tell them to do. So they cannot even take a decision which could be genuinely in their own interest, because they must respond to the interest of a foreign power. They have no capacity to resist it. So we have this crisis in the Muslim world, along with the crisis which we see in the Western and United States and American world. Last year I spoke, and I don't assume that you still remember, that how Muslim society historically responded to the challenge of Western hegemony. And I mentioned to various Islamic movements and revivalist movements and resurgent movements which grew in parts of the Muslim world, some of them strong, to some degree powerful, but how in ultimate sense they failed, that they really could not deliver what they promised. And in that context, I mentioned that Hizmet, which is the gift of great Ustaz Sheikh Fethullah Gülen, and his spiritual capacity to find a more peaceful path where traditional Islamic spiritual values should be harmonized with positive elements of modernity. That he created a path which should not be based on the image of enemy, war, conflict, and confrontation, but rather to see that what is good in this Western modernity, which we can embrace and give it roots and foundations from our own religious and spiritual foundations. Therefore, one question which actually I'm raising is that, particularly here in our American setting, is it possible that Hizmet answers to some of the challenges which other religious groups could not? Now, one thing we all know and see, that the Muslim community here in the United States is growing. Okay? However, this growth is not qualitative, but it is more quantitative. It is because more and more people are coming to United States for a variety of reasons. Economic opportunities, or their societies are collapsing and they have no option. America has been taking recently about 2 million immigrants per year, legal. Okay. America takes more than 100,000 refugees and asylum seekers every year. And if you look at the world, who is refugee? They are Muslims. More than 80, there are 80 million refugees in the world. Okay? So if you give them a country, they will take the whole Turkey, okay? The whole France, the whole Germany. Okay? Bigger than France, bigger than Germany, bigger than Turkey, the refugees in the world. And 80% of these refugees are Muslims. Okay? Because the societies which are collapsing are Muslim societies. So we have this flow of people which that quantitatively we see that the Muslim communities are growing. But it remains an immigrant phenomenon. Okay. We are not seeing the growth of American Islam as an idea and as a community. We are seeing the presence of immigrant communities. Pakistani community, Indian community, Palestinian community, Arab community. Okay? But we really not see that Islam as an American religion and Islamic identity as an American identity, okay, is developing. Okay? I go around in many mosques in Chicago and lead Jummahs. Some of these mosques have 2,000 people. You know, it's quite scary to see 2,000 people sitting in front of you. Okay? But what I see that those people, those young children whom I taught, or I saw, or I interacted with them 30 years ago, they are not there. Okay. So the mosque is very happy because they have more money, they have more people. But if you ask them, where are your own children? Then it's quite a painful reality. And in a long time ago, more than 30 years ago, I was in a mosque in a community. I wouldn't mention the name of city. At that time, there were not many Muslims. Mosques were not common as they are now. Okay. This growth which you see is past 20 years. And I've been here 42 years. Okay. I'm quite a senior citizen here. Okay. So, in this mosque, and I was part of that community. There were virtually everybody. There were black Muslims, there were Arabs, there were Pakistanis, Indians, even Shias, because Shias didn't have their own mosque, so even Shia will come and pray there. Then community started to grow. Okay. As soon as there were enough Pakistanis, they moved out and built their own mosque. Enough Shias came, so they built their Shia mosques. Okay. the blacks, they were pushed out because they were poor and they were not contributing a lot. The mosque which is left with Arabs was had also infighting among different groups. So if you look at that mosque in 1985, you may feel that a beautiful American Ummah is rising. But if you look at it 40 years later, you can see that there is no Ummah. There are different pockets which are trying to develop independently. And what is more tragic of the story, that I went back 30 years later to see what happened to these children whom I was teaching, and where are they now? And out of 50, 60 families that I knew them personally, there was not one family, not one, which should be happy and satisfied. Each family has a tragic story. The children who left Islam, the children who went to the wrong paths, the children who married in all directions and they are now divorced, and the older retired parents are left to raise these grandchildren because their parents do not feel responsibility. So it was such a sad occasion. And my wife, she's sitting there. She said, you know, when we came here, everybody was so happy as we have come to paradise in America. You know, we were just enjoying. And now when you meet them, everybody is weeping, okay, cursing the day they came to the United States. So these are the tragic realities of our existence which we are facing. So what he said in the beginning, that the beauty of Islam was that wherever it went, it became native. It didn't exist as a foreign entity. It just integrated itself into the native culture, and the native culture became Muslim. And here we have more than half century, and I really do not see that process taking place. And we continue to live as foreigners, as an immigrant community, and our children are running away in all directions. Of course, there are happy stories, but it's very small. You know, if out of 100 people you save 5, 6, that's not a success story. You know, if you lose 90% of your people, you know. At CTU, we had someone here from CTU. We used to have a program which was Interfaith, which was called Common Good or something. And we had 33 Muslims, selected Muslims, imams, teachers, chaplains, 33 Jewish rabbis, 33 Catholic priests, teachers. And we had a series of topics and discussions from the perspective of our religious community. And I still remember, and it's at least 10 years ago, maybe more, one session which we did was about how we keep our youth attached to our community. What do we do to keep our young people attached to our community? Okay? And among views, they said we are 65% successful. That 65% of Jewish kids, they remain attached to the synagogue and the community where they grow. Among Christians, they said it's 40-45% that we can keep our young people attached to our church. And among Muslims, it was hardly 10%, which is, by the way, same with Hindus, 10%. So now again, we do not say these 90%, where do they go? Some of them might be very Muslim, even though they are not attached with the mosque and community. But the chances of that are small, because an individual which is not part of the community cannot keep faith and religion, because faith demands a community. Okay? Prophets do not give only a message, they create a community. اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا. That it is God's blessing that He connected your heart and made them one community. Okay? Says, لو أنفقت ما في الأرض جميعا ما ألفت بين قلوبهم. O Prophet, if you have spent everything on this earth to create this community, you could not have done so. But God has connected their heart. So faith and community, they are connected. If a person is not part of the community, then either he has left or soon he will leave. Because it is hard to maintain faith without a supporting community. So as we have many communities which came to United States, Hizmet is relatively new. Okay? That they are not as old as some of the communities which have been around. Hizmet does have some elements which are very encouraging. One is that they have worked globally. There is no Muslim organization, but they have been very native. Okay? We have a very big Islamic movement in Pakistan, but it's only in Pakistan. We have Muslim Brotherhood, but it's in Egypt and maybe in some neighboring Arab countries. But Hizmet has went to the whole world and built their schools. Okay? So they had this certain global vision that my responsibility is to people in Azerbaijan, to people in Uzbekistan. And most important is that their understanding and interpretation of Islam is not confrontational. One problem with all these other Islamic movements is that in their narrative, they have this duality, where West is an enemy, West is threatening, West is Taghut, West is the source of evil and wrong. And the relationship between us and them is the relationship of conflict. So they want to fight. And the tragedy is they cannot win. So when they fight, they increase their suffering. Okay? Okay. That is not the methodology which Hizmet adopted. Okay? What they adopted was very wise methodology. That we seek the good of all societies and all cultures, and we build our relationship with them. So is it possible that Hizmet becomes that organization which can create an American Islam, which incorporates positive elements of American and Western society, and that requires that they transcend their Turkishness. Okay? Okay? That you have to become more global, which you are in terms of your belief, that in terms of belief you don't have that hostile imagination which some people have. But in terms of functioning, organization, inclusion of various communities, various groups, and creating and defining an American Islam. Okay? Because ultimately, our future generations need an American Islam. They cannot survive as Pakistani Muslims, or Indian Muslims, or Egyptian Muslims. They need to be American Muslims. Okay? So of course there are organizations which, particularly one of the good thing I would say, that in political realm we have many organizations which have emerged and they are doing a remarkably good job, such as CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, Muslim Public Affairs Council, and our Illinois Civic Coalition. They are relatively new, but in a very short time they have created enormous influence and connections with the mainstream community, white, black, Democrats, Republicans. They have done that successfully, and alhamdulillah they are doing well. But the same thing is not happening at social and religious level. So their work does not become organic. It must be rooted in the community. And if community remains fragmented and broken, it makes their job more difficult and more hard. So I'll stop here. I still have, 5 minutes?
The salah is in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, okay. So,
but this is a very, I'm really sorry that, you have to stop here because
Yeah.
I think, it was developing into, how we can solve this problem, hopefully, right? It's just you eloquently, stage the problem, but, how we go from here to the solution, and then what could be the
it's a very difficult problem because, it's hard to build something on shifting grounds. And America is shifting ground. We don't have a solid culture here. As I said, American society itself is declining, itself suffering from inner corrosion. So, historically we face a solid culture and a solid community. And we move and establish our own community there. And that is mainly because, most importantly, is that a religious and spiritual culture is facing a culture of doubt and disbelief. And how to...
So maybe, after the program finishes tonight, we should get together and then,
Yes.
discuss this a little bit in further in
Yes,
detail.
we also need to talk how Trump can help us.
Inshallah. And you never know.
So, you mentioned that 65% of the Jewish community, they were able to keep the young people with their synagogue, and then 40, 45, and then the 10%. So what was the reason that they were able to keep 65, the maximum percentage?
First of all, Jews are very strong as a community. We are not. I mean, this is the advantage of small community, I can say, and especially a community which is historically persecuted. Plus, they put enormous resources into it. If you take the Hillel budget, which takes care of youth on campuses, it is more than $100 million per year. We have more Muslim students on our campuses. I doubt we spend even $1 million on them. So they put enormous effort into keeping their young into the fold. So the human resource, the institutional resource, the cultural and intellectual resource which goes into that. And similar commitment is not there in our communities, unfortunately. Sunni Islam is also very relaxed in structure, like we don't have that kind of hierarchies and those things also help, like Catholics have also higher ratio of keeping. Orthodox Christians have higher ratio of keeping, because you have to be part of the church in order to be a Catholic. So sometimes this loose attitude which we have does not help in this situation in which we are, because when people lose, they are gone. So sorry, I wanted to hear Sister Dilara and her work. If you want to say something, a couple of minutes before we go to prayer.